On a quiet evening in 1926, the famous Austrian poet Rainer Maria Rilke was sitting in his garden in Switzerland. It was a calm, unremarkable twilight, the kind of evening where the world seems to hold its breath. Yet suddenly, an inexplicable, profound sense of loss washed over him. He felt a sharp, intense, irrational connection to a specific, obscure melody he hadn't heard since his earliest childhood, a faint, melancholy lullaby his mother used to hum when he was a boy. He felt the weight of it so strongly that he began to weep, sitting there in the grass, convinced, in that strange, suspended moment, that someone, somewhere, was thinking of him. At that exact moment, hundreds of miles away, in a bustling clinical and impersonal hospital in Prague, an old woman lay on her deathbed. As her consciousness flickered in the final hours, she suddenly began to hum that very same rare, forgotten melody. She had been the nanny of Rilke's childhood friend, a woman he had not seen in decades. In her final moments, as the boundaries of her own life began to dissolve, she had been thinking deeply of the young boy she once cared for. When Rilke later discovered the timeline of these events, he was left with a chilling, beautiful, and profoundly disturbing question that has haunted philosophers, poets, and thinkers for centuries. Was this just a trick of memory, a statistical anomaly in a world of billions of daily occurrences, or was it something more? For most, we label this a coincidence, a fleeting curiosity of human experience. We file it away as a quirk of fate and move on. But for others, these moments of meaningful alignment suggest a deeper, more mysterious, and perhaps more intentional architecture to our lives. It makes us wonder if the internal world of our thoughts and the external world of physical events are more connected than we dare to believe. It makes us wonder if the boundaries we draw between me and the world are thinner than we think. This brings us to one of the most enigmatic questions in psychology. Is reality truly random, a chaotic collision of atoms and accidents, or are we living in a web of hidden patterns that we are only just beginning to perceive? Welcome to A Patient Mind. Today we are exploring a concept that hits closer to home than even the most profound synchronicity. Today, we are looking at psychological projection and the shadow self. Just as Carl Jung looked at the theory of synchronicity to understand how the mind interacts with the world, he looked at the shadow to understand how the mind interacts with its own depths. If synchronicity is the bridge between the inner and outer worlds, the shadow's the dark cellar beneath our own house, a place we spend most of our lives trying to keep locked, bolted, and forgotten. Jung defined the shadow as the part of our psyche that contains everything we prefer not to acknowledge about ourselves. It is the repository of our repressed desires, our secret angers, our feelings of inadequacy, and the primal instincts that don't fit into the polite, curated version of the person we show the world. When you are a child, you learn quickly what behaviors earn love and what behaviors earn disapproval. The traits that earn disapproval, your selfishness, your aggression, your jealousy, your raw, unfiltered honesty, do not disappear. They are simply exiled. They are pushed into the basement of your being. The tragic reality, Jung argued, is that we do not simply get rid of these parts by ignoring them. That is the great illusion of the ego. Instead, we project them. Projection is a psychological defense mechanism where we take our own internal conflicts, the things we refuse to accept in our own hearts, and throw them onto other people. It is a way of externalizing our pain so we don't have to carry it. Have you ever felt an instant, irrational dislike for someone you barely know? Perhaps you find their arrogance intolerable or their selfishness appalling. Jung would suggest that you aren't just reacting to their behavior, you are reacting to the reflection of your own hidden arrogance or selfishness, which you have buried so deep that you can no longer recognize it as your own. We see this everywhere. We see it in the way we obsess over the flaws of public figures, the way we judge the choices of our friends, and the way we characterize our enemies. By making them the villain, we don't have to face the villain in the mirror. It is a seductive way to live because it places the responsibility for our discomfort entirely on someone else. If they would just change, we would be at peace. But the turmoil remains because the source is not outside, it is within. You are fighting a war against yourself, but you are wearing the uniform of a soldier fighting someone else. Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." When we refuse to acknowledge our shadow, we become puppets of our own repressed emotions. We repeat the same relationship failures, the same career frustrations, and the same emotional cycles, convinced that the world is simply unfair or that we are just unlucky. We mistake our own projections for reality. We see an enemy where there is only a mirror, and we react to a ghost we have created ourselves. To integrate the shadow is not to become evil or to give in to our darkest impulses. It is the opposite. It is to take ownership of them. It is to recognize that the capacity for cruelty, selfishness, and jealousy exists within every human heart, including our own. Once we acknowledge these qualities, they lose their power to control us. They stop being monsters in the dark and start being parts of ourselves that we can finally understand and manage. You stop being afraid of the cellar when you finally turn on the light and realize it's just a room. The process of integration is perhaps the hardest work a human being can do. It requires a radical, brutal kind of honesty. It asks us to look at the traits we despise in others, the traits that make our blood boil, and ask, where does this exist within me? It asks us to stop running. It is an uncomfortable process. It is in many ways the catastrophic mistake we often make in our pursuit of growth. The belief that we can achieve wholeness while leaving half of ourselves behind. We want to be saints, but we forget that we are also capable of being sinners, and that, in the balance between the two, we find our humanity. If synchronicity reminds us that the world is not as cold and mechanical as we think, the shadow reminds us that we are not as simple or as virtuous as we believe. Both are necessary pieces of the puzzle. Both demand that we stop looking outward for all the answers and start looking inward, with the patience and the courage to see what is really there. Think about the way we hold on to our grudges. Think about the way we judge the person in traffic, the coworker who made a mistake, or the partner who didn't meet our expectations. In every single one of those moments, we are choosing to project. We are choosing to save our own ego from the pain of self-reflection. But at what cost? At the cost of our own freedom. As long as you believe someone else is the source of your misery, you are giving them the keys to your life. Like the melody that crossed the miles to reach a dying woman, our lives are filled with threads that seem disconnected. When we finally face our shadow, we start to see the pattern. We stop being the victims of our own unconsciousness, and we start becoming the architects of our own character. We realize that the person we are running from is the person we need to become. Ultimately, we are all hiders and seekers. We hide from the truths that hurt, and we seek the meanings that heal. But we cannot find the meaning if we refuse to look in the places we've hidden the truth. There is something inherently other about everything, something beyond our comprehension that we participate in without understanding, like an infinite game of hide and seek where the hider is also the seeker. We just haven't looked in enough places to discover this yet, and the most important place to look is in the dark, quiet corners of our own minds, where the most precious things are often left in the shadows. This work of shadow integration is not a destination. It is a lifelong practice. It is the act of becoming whole. It is the act of saying, I am all of this. I am the light, and I am the dark. I am the hero of my story, and I am the villain I have spent so long criticizing in others. When you can say that with honesty, the world stops being a place of threats and starts being a place of reflection. You become less reactive, less defensive, and more compassionate, not because you have become perfect, but because you finally understand what it means to be flawed. So the next time you feel that flash of intense, irrational anger towards someone else, take a breath. Don't look at them. Look at the feeling. Look at the anger itself. Ask yourself, what is it in me that is being reflected in them? What have I been hiding in my own cellar that is now demanding to be seen? Thank you so much for joining me in this reflection. If this resonated with you, consider subscribing to A Patient Mind as we continue to explore the architecture of the human experience together. Let me know in the comments, what is one trait you've noticed in others that forced you to look closer at yourself? What was the moment you realized the mirror was pointing back at you? I'll see you in the next video.